Almighty God, give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, I have received communication from Mr. Faris Alwari, MP, member for San Fernando West, who has requested leave of absence for the period March 22nd to April 7th, 2023. Dr. Lakram Bodo, MP, member for Faizabad, who has requested leave of absence for the period March 22nd to 29th, 2023. And from Dr. Rai Ragbir, MP, member for Kamuta Manzanilla, who has requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the Senate. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, as you may be aware, Mr. Jarat Narayan, a former member of Parliament, passed away on Wednesday, February 27, 2023. Mr. Narayan served as the member for Aruka North and as a former Minister of Agriculture, Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Works and Transportation during the 4th Republican Parliament, opposition member during the 5th and 6th Republican Parliaments, Minister of Local Government during the 7th Republican Parliament, and as Minister of Local Government and Minister of Agriculture, Land and Marine Resources during the 8th Republican Parliament. I now invite honorable members to pay their respective tributes on the occasion of the passing of Mr. Narayan. Oh, member for Arima. Oh, I'm sorry. Member for Diego Martin Centre. Member for Diego Martin Northeast.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The simplest way that we can describe Jarat Narayan is a humble, dedicated, committed, hard-working servant of the people. Jarat was born in 1944 in Arima and left this earth, unfortunately, on February 27th of this year. He was educated at the Arima Boys Government Primary School, also attended Holy Cross College in Arima and the Cipriani Labor College. I think it is safe to say that Jarat was a true Arimian. He came from a well-known Arima family, and I always remember him speaking about the fact that he was born in a P&M house, and his father made sure that he attended political meetings to hear the then Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams. He became active in politics in 1981 during the general election, and then jumped into the fray to contest the local government election, which he won, in the then St. George East County Council. He won again in 1987 in the elections of that year, local government elections. He was an excellent county councillor, well respected, and having gained that experience, he put his name forward, or his name was put forward to become a candidate for the general elections of 1991. And I remember our Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, telling me in 1991, when I was also a candidate in that election, and I saw and heard Jarrett Narain on the campaign trail, I remember asking Dr. Rowley about Jarrett, and what Dr. Rowley told me is that Jarrett was so impressive as a counselor and such a legendary speaker on the platform that he was thought to be an excellent candidate for the general election. He won his seat in 1991, the Aruka North seat. He was made parliamentary secretary with me. I was then appointed Minister of Works and Transport, and he was made parliamentary secretary in that same ministry. And later on, when I was appointed Minister of Local Government at the same time, Jarrett was also made parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Local Government. And in fact, I had so much work to do that I gave Jarrett the responsibility for managing the local government affairs and also the unemployment relief program, at which both tasks at which he was a tremendous success. He continued his electoral success, scoring victories in 1995, 2000, 2001, 2002, again coming back into this parliament as the Member of Parliament for Aruka North. And there's even a calypso about him, where Lord Kitchener warned the opposition in song, if you're thinking about Aruka, brother, change your mind. That whole area belonged to Jarrett Narain. Jarrett was a giant, short in stature, but a giant of a man. I remember him fondly. He was a true representative of the people, humble, sincere, hardworking, served everyone, regardless of their political persuasion. There was so much to the man. He was a trade union representative. He was a vice president of the National Union of Government and Federated Workers, Deputy Secretary General, actually, of the National Union of Government and Federated Workers. He was also head of the Allied Workers section of the NUGFW. He was a shop steward in the Botanical Gardens section of the Union. He also had his religious side. He was related to the then Dharmacharya of the Mahasabha. Jarrett was a great singer of bhajans and other religious Hindu songs. He received many awards for his community service. First place in the Indian song category in Best Village in 1974, 75, and 76. Awards from the Bonaire Gardens Community Council, the Dabadi, Aruka, Lopino, Five Rivers, and Red Hill Village Councils, to name a few. He was a true exemplar and a patriot. We will not see someone like Jarrett again in the future. Not easily says somebody like Jarrett. He was honored with the Shekonia Medal Silver at the National Awards last year. And he also received the Dr. Eric Williams Gold Medal from the People's National Movement with gratitude. He was a man of many talents. He represented this country across the globe at election observer missions. He was a great man. May he rest in peace, and on behalf of the government and the People's National Movement, I wish him Godspeed as he goes off on his next journey to another place. Thank you.
Member for Cuba South.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, as I take the opportunity on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition, the Member for Siparia, and my colleagues to extend our deepest condolences to the family of the late Jarrett Narain on his passing. We remember him for his service to Trinidad and Tobago and the very fact that he would have served the people of this country in differing categories, if I should use that phrase, because I had the opportunity to meet him on a number of occasions during my tenure at the All Trinidad Sugar and General Workers Trade Union when he was the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Marine Resources. And as we would have heard from the member for Diego Martin Northeast, he reflected on his career in different portfolios. And I could remember in my very young days listening to his voice and remembering him as an officer at the central executive level of the National Union of Government and Federated Workers Union. A man of simplicity who had his own style, whether in the trade union arena or in the political guile, so to speak. And we remember him for having served the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago as the Member of Parliament for Arouca North between 1995 to 2007, and for his service to Trinidad and Tobago as the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Marine Resources, Minister of Local Government, and the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Works and Transport. We also take note of the fact that he served on key committees such as the Joint Select Committee on Equal Opportunities Legislation, as well as the Planning and Development JSC, and taking into consideration, Madam Speaker, whilst we would have differed politically, we will all find common ground with his passion and his determination and his devotion to duty. And in my interactions with him, I found out that he was a fan, or should I say, a lover and a practitioner of East Indian classical singing, and one who did Ramayana reading and so on differing occasions in Arima and surrounding areas. So he understood his religious commitment also. So today, as we mourn his passing, we reflect on not only his service to country, but with his service to community and his service to the ordinary people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we pray that Lord Krishna will bless his soul to continue its journey and comfort members of the bereaved family on his passing. Om Sadgati. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, I too wish to pay tribute to Mr. Jarat Narain. Mr. Narain was indeed a powerhouse politician, a man of numerous accolades, who served the people with humility. His introduction to the political arena started at the tender age of 10, when his father insisted that he attended political meetings to hear, and I quote, the great speeches from the then Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams. It is from his attendance at those meetings that Mr. Narain developed a fervor for politics. That fervor was the springboard for his entry into politics at the county council level. Mr. Narain was tremendously popular during his tenure as a local government representative, and that experience and stock of goodwill paved his way to becoming an elected member of Parliament in 1991. Any question regarding his popularity is clearly answered by his overwhelming victories at the polls for 4 consecutive general elections. That popularity, coupled with his penchant for work and service delivery to his constituents, earned him the affectionate alias, the Short Giant. During Mr. Narain's tenure as the representative for Arouca North, he was credited with several projects which enhanced the quality of life of and advanced the educational opportunities for his constituents. Among those projects were the rebuilding of the Arima West Primary School, the construction of the Dabadi Government School, the Bonnier High School, the Aruka Police Station, and the Youth Training Center on Golden Grove Road, a squadron clubhouse and pavilion on Henry Street, Aruka, as well as the laying of 3 hard surface sporting facility courts. For his meritorious service to community, Mr. Narayan was awarded the Shakonia Silver National Medal. Mr. Narayan was also a giant in other respects. He was regarded by his political counterparts as a powerful voice, a great speaker with a voice which commanded the attention of all during many debates in the House. Mr. Narayan contributed to numerous bills and motions and served on many committees during his time in this Parliament. Notable were his contributions to the debates on the Maxi Taxi Amendment Bill 1994, the Animals Amendment Bill 1997, the Public Sector Amendment Bill 1998, and the Plant Protection Amendment Bill 2001. He contributed to the Land Tenant Security of Tenure Rent Review Order, marketing facilities for vendors, scavenging services transfer of funds, and illegal dumping on Cedar Hill Road motions. He also served on many joint select committees and special select committees, among them being the Public Accounts Committee, the Joint Select Committee on Public Holidays, and on the Equal Opportunity Legislation, the National Chutney Foundation Incorporation Bill, Amendment Life Ministries Incorporation Bill, and the Planning and Development of Land Bill 2001. His contributions in Parliament, in his various portfolios, and in his constituency are testimony to his commitment and dedication to the improvement of the lives and interests of different groups in our society. Mr. Narayan will always be remembered as a humble and committed man, pledged to the service of his fellow men and fellow women. I take this opportunity to express my deepest condolences to his wife, Grace, and to the members of the Narayan family during this time of mourning. And I pray that the Almighty God grants them peace and consolation during their time of bereavement. I now ask that we stand and observe a minute of silence as a mark of respect. May his soul rest in peace. Members may kindly be seated. Honorable members, an appropriate letter will be sent to convey our condolences to the family of the late Mr. Jarat Narayan.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions.
Honorable members, correspondence has been received from the President of the Senate dated March 1st, 2023, which states as follows. Dear Speaker, rechange in membership of Joint Select Committees. Reference is made to the subject at caption. At a sitting held on Tuesday, February 28th, 2023, the Senate agreed to the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Senate agree to the following appointments to Joint Select Committees. 1. On the Joint Select Committee on National Security, Mr. Rishi Sukai in lieu of Mr. Nigel De Freitas. 2. On the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises, Mr. Rishi Sukai in lieu of Mr. Nigel De Freitas. And 3. On the Joint Select Committee on the Fisheries Management No. 2 Bill 2020, Mrs. Paula Gopi-Skoon in lieu of Mr. Nigel De Freitas, and Mrs. Renuka Segram Singh Suklal in lieu of Dr. Muhammad Yunus Ibrahim. Accordingly, I respectfully request that the House of Representatives be informed of this decision at the earliest convenience, please. Thank you. Respectfully, Nigel De Freitas, President of the Senate.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
The Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay paper number 1, the 44th annual report of the Ombudsman for the period January 2021 to December 2021. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Attorney General.
Speaker, in the absence of the Attorney General, I have the honor to lay the 12th annual report of the Police Complaints Authority for the period October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to lay the following papers. The annual report on consolidated financial statements of the First Citizens Investment Services Limited and its subsidiaries for the year ended September 30th, 2022. 4. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the year ended September 30th, 2019. 5. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Agricultural Development Bank of Trinidad and Tobago for the year ended September 30th, 2018. 6. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, Seized Assets Fund account for the year ended September 30th, 2022. 7. The report on the management of the Seized Asset Fund for the financial year ended September 30th, 2022. 8. The annual report of First Citizens Depository Services Limited, formerly First Citizens Asset Management Limited, for the financial year ended September 30th, 2021. I beg to move that paper 3 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee and papers 4 to 6 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honourable members, the question is that paper 3 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee and papers 4 to 6 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Minister of Public Administration.
Madam Speaker, in the absence of the Minister of Public Administration, I have the honor to lay paper number 9, the annual report of the Ministry of Public Administration for the period October 1st, 2014 to September 30th, 2015. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very warmly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. The 2020 annual report on the operations of the National Forensic DNA Data Bank Custodian Unit and the Defense Pensions, Terminal and Other Grants Amendment Regulations 2023. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay paper number 12, the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation Vesting Amendment to the First Schedule Order 2023.
The Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Extension of Period for Payment of 50% of Fixed Penalty Order 2023. I thank you.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. 14 to 45, the land acquisition requisitions numbers 1 to 32, orders 2023. Thank you.
The Leader of the House.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to lay the following papers. Paper number 46, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 6th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited for the financial years 2012 and 2013. Paper number 47, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 6th report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the audited financial statements of the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2014 and 2020. Paper number 48, the second ministerial response of the Ministry of Planning and Development to the 7th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on the examination into the implementation of the Public Sector Investment Program, PSIP, for fiscal year 2021. Papers 49 and 50, the ministerial responses to the 4th report of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure on an inquiry into the impact of landfills on the environment of Trinidad and Tobago. These responses, Madam Speaker, are from the Ministries of Public Utilities and Health. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Committees.
Member for Tobago East.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the following reports. The 9th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on the examination of the implementation of the 2021 budget with emphasis on the green economy. The 10th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on the examination into the findings of the report on factors contributing to clinical outcomes of COVID-19 patients in Trinidad and Tobago, conducted by the government-appointed committee. The 11th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on the examination into the island-wide power outage and blackout that occurred on February 16, 2022. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
The member for Miara.
Number 1, to the Minister of Works and Transport. In light of the recent protests which block parts of the Manzanilla Bypass Road, will the Minister indicate what remedial works have been executed to resolve this issue?
And Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Manzanilla-Mayaro Road connects the communities of Sandy Grande, Kaiwal, and Manzanilla to Ottawa, Mayaro, and Guayaguayari. It is bounded by the Nariva Swamp in the west and the Atlantic Ocean to the east, approximately 26 kilometers in length. Over the period between 21st to 20th November 2022, there was structural collapse of the roadway as a result of consistent and heavy rainfall. These failures also occurred in 2014 and twice prior to that. Investigations have indicated that these failures was a result of excessive water flowing from the swamp. The Nariva Swamp is the largest swamp in the country, and currently there are 11 catchments with 8 points of entry into the swamp. Due to global warming, this flooding event is likely to increase in frequency. It is also a very highly sensitive area. A temporary diversion of an unpaved road using mill material was built in order to restore connectivity between the respective communities in the shortest possible time frame. The diversion has a speed limit of 40 kilometers per hour. However, due to motorists not adhering to the speed limit and heavy vehicles using the roadway to access the energy facilities in the Mayaro area, from time to time, damage to this roadway will occur. However, the Ministry of Works and Transport continues to check the roadway weekly and undertake maintenance work when required. Up to 2 days ago, the roadway was checked.
Honourable Minister, your time is now spent.
Thank you.
Member for Miaru.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, taking note of the temporary nature of the road, are you willing to provide an update on the progress of the proposed 10-kilometer new roadway that the ministry has indicated that they are pursuing at this time?
Madam Speaker, up to 2 days ago, the roadway was checked and deemed to be in a satisfactory condition based on the challenges of the area. However, the ministry at the moment is undertaking the designs and all the studies to facilitate the construction of a new road. And I want to indicate, as the member will be aware, that is a very sensitive area. And what we don't want to happen is what happened in 2014, where over $40 million was spent, and a couple of years after, again, we have to go back and rebuild the road. It is a very sensitive area, and the studies has to be done. We are working now with the IMA, the EMA, the University of the West Indies, and different units at the ministry to ensure that when we construct the road in the future, the road can withstand and do not damage the Nariva swamp. Thank you.
For Miaru.
Madam Speaker, Minister, are we still on target for a September-October delivery time, taking note of the rainy season? That is the period when we get the most heavy torrential downfalls.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Again, Madam Speaker, I can give the assurance to the member that the ministry is pursuing this task. However, we have to satisfy several requirements to ensure that this Nariva swamp is not damaged in the process. The ministry does have a structure to ensure that we should be able to get out of the ground before the rainy season. But it is not a road that we just have to repave. As you recognize, we have to rebuild the road, and we have to make sure that the conditions that prevail on that part of the island, the road can withstand the pressures that is anticipated going forward. Thank you.
Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, question 2 to the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister. In light of the upcoming proclamation of legislation governing the licensing of children's homes, will the Minister indicate whether the government has secured alternative accommodation and care for children who are in homes that will not be licensed?
Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, government has been engaging key stakeholders to ensure that all homes meet the requirements to be licensed in readiness for proclamation. This matter is expected to be discussed at the monthly meeting of the Standing Committee on Child Protection tomorrow, March 23, 2023, and I will provide a definite statement on this matter shortly thereafter.
Sister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Minister. Minister, can you indicate how many homes and how many children will be affected?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, the matter will be ventilated at the Standing Committee's meeting tomorrow, and a definite statement will be provided shortly thereafter. Thank you.
Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Minister. Would the Minister indicate whether this development is a result of the continuous understaffing and under-resourcing of the stakeholders in the area of child protection and care by the state?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, if that is the member's perception, that is his perception. But as far as I am aware, government has been doing its best to resource the sector. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Maruga Tabana.
Thank you, Madam. To the Prime Minister, will the Prime Minister state when the various spiritual Baptist organizations will receive requested funding to facilitate this year's celebrations of the Spiritual Baptist Liberation Day on March 30, 2023?
Prime Minister.
Thank
you very much. Madam Speaker, for the member for Maruga Tableland, the responsibility for funding religious and non-governmental organizations for national days and festivals falls under the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts. That ministry has been working with the various spiritual Baptist organizations. And in fact, Madam Speaker, the process is that the organizations must put in applications, request the amount of funding. It is then looked at by the ministry staff, and they will then make the various recommendations to Cabinet for Cabinet to confirm. So due to the untimely and the late applications by some, that process has finally been completed by the various organizations. And now there is a note before Cabinet that is going to be considered this week, at which the recommendations will be considered, approved and confirmed, and the requisite financing will be done before the Spiritual Baptist holiday next week.
Member for Naparima.
Minister state whether this information has been forwarded to the organizations, because we are aware that they're telling us they have no feedback from the government.
Madam Speaker, as I understand, the member for Naparima sometimes doesn't understand the process. It is the organizations that must put in their applications. The Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts staff had been working with them to get the various applications in well before time. Unfortunately, not all of the organizations did what they were supposed to. That process has now been completed, and the requisite recommendation has been sent to Cabinet, where they will, at our weekly deliberations, be looked at, approved, and confirmed, and then the money is awaiting from the Ministry of Finance to make these payments before time.
Member for Naparima.
Is the minister telling us that the fault lies with the organization and not with the sloth of the ministry of the government?
Member, that does not arise having regard to the question asked and the answer given.
Questions on notice?
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's one question for written response, and we're asking for a 2-week deferral to give that answer.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House, and moved by a minister.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, whereas it has become necessary to make appointments to joint select committees, I beg to move that this House agree to the following appointment. Dr. Rai Ragbir, in lieu of Mr. Rushton Parry, on the Joint Select Committee on the Fisheries Management, number 2, Bill 2020.
Honourable members, the question is that the House agree to the following appointment to the Joint Select Committee. Dr. Rai Ragbir, in lieu of Mr. Rushton Parry, on the Joint Select Committee on the Fisheries Management, number 2, Bill 2020. All in favour say aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Public business, government business, motions.
The Prime Minister. The Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with your leave, I would just like to wish, before I get into the motion, I would just like to wish the Christian community happy Lent season. the Hindu community, Happy Navratri, and to the Muslim community, which begins fasting tomorrow, Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 4.3 of the Elections and Boundaries Commission, Local Government and Tobago House of Assembly Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, that as soon as may be after the Elections and Boundaries Commission, hereinafter referred to as the Commission, has submitted a report under Section 4.1a of the Act. The Minister shall lay before the House of Representatives for its approval of the draft of an order paper by the President for giving effect, whether with or without modifications, to the recommendations contained in the report. And whereas the Commission has submitted a report to the Minister in accordance with Section 4.1a of the Act, and whereas the draft of an order entitled the Elections and Boundaries Commission Local Government and Tobago House of Assembly Order 2021, given effect to the recommendations of the Commission, was laid before the House of Representatives on the 4th day of February 2022. Be it resolved that the draft of the Elections and Boundaries Commission Local Government and Tobago House of Assembly Order 2021 be approved. Madam Speaker, it is my privilege to represent here today for the adoption of this House the 10th report of the Elections and Boundaries Commission under the Elections and Boundaries Commission Local Government and Tobago House of Assembly Act, Chapter 2550, for the purpose of local government elections. I am here today to discharge the responsibilities of this portfolio during the brief absence of my colleague, the Member of Parliament for San Fernando West, who has been aggressively leading the charge of local government reform and is currently out of the country at this time. Madam Speaker, this report was produced by the Elections and Boundaries Commission, an independent body charged with the responsibility of defining and reviewing the boundaries of the electoral districts into which an electoral area is divided for the purpose of local government elections. The Elections and Boundaries Commission, the EBC, the successor of institutions of two bodies, the Boundaries Commission and the Elections Commission, and the responsibilities of both these entities were amalgamated by Part 4, Chapter 4 of the Republican Constitution enacted in 1976. Since its establishment, the EBC and its staff have demonstrated their continued independence and have worked tirelessly to ensure that they discharge their functions in accordance with their constitutional mandate. Madam Speaker, I wish to commend the EBC for their hard work and unwavering commitment and for guarding the rights and privileges of our citizens as enshrined in the Constitution. Madam Speaker, to date, the EBC, in its current and former state, has conducted 16 general elections, 14 local government elections, and 12 TAJ elections. There is none among us that can say that the EBC does not perform its role independently. We respect the independence of the EBC. We are aware that the law allows us to provide justification to the Parliament for the changes we propose. We have considered the 10th report and accept no changes are necessary. Given the comprehensive review and analysis undertaken by the EBC, Madam Speaker, before I go into the specifics of the report, permit me a few moments to expound on the significance of this report as it relates to the new local government system under which the next local government elections will be committed and conducted. Madam Speaker, as you are aware, this government piloted the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Act 2022, which came into law and was partially proclaimed with respect to certain essential features of the reform. Madam Speaker, as you have heard it on numerous occasions in this House, and I must repeat it for the benefit of the citizenry, that this reform law is a culmination of a promise we made to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is a promise we made when we took office in 2015, one deeply rooted in the acute vision of our leader, the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, who was focused on delivering a modern, transformed local government system, one with greater autonomy and accountability, improved governance and administrative structures, secured funding, more effective and efficient delivery of goods and services, balanced and sustainable local economic development, robust monitoring and evaluation to ensure value for money, and greater citizenry and civil society participation. What was envisioned was a system capable of bringing governance closer to the people, and we got there by adopting a people-centered approach and putting people first. Madam Speaker, this is what we set out to do, and it is what we achieved when the law was passed. Since the passage of the Municipal Corporations Act, Chapter 2504, there have been numerous attempts at reforms, but I dare to say that this PNM government has been able to achieve the most meaningful and progressive version to date. Madam Speaker, we are ensured there was a wide consultation in development of this new system so that when the law was passed, everyone would have had their say. This government continues to be one that operates within the confines of the law and always seeks to do what is right. We continue to rely on the fact that given our constitutional arrangements rooted in the separation of powers, the judiciary, like the EBC, will remain independent. Madam Speaker, currently, Trinidad is divided into 14 electoral areas represented by 14 municipal corporations, established and continue under this Municipal Corporations Act, Chapter 2504. These include 2 cities, 3 boroughs, 9 regional corporations, 7 are which under the PNM, and 7 which are UNC controlled. Altogether, the 14 electoral areas are broken up by the EBC into 139 electoral districts. The number of electoral districts in the 5 municipal electoral areas of Port of Spain, San Fernando, Arima, Point Fortin, and Chaguanas are fixed by law and cannot be changed. The number of districts for each are set out in Part 1 of the first schedule to the Act as follows: Port of Spain 12, San Fernando 9, Arima 7, Point Fortin 6, and Chaguanas 8. Madam Speaker, as we are on the topic of cities and the boroughs, I am pleased to say that as a former mayor myself, that this government, as part of the new reform system, is championing the creation of 2 new additional boroughs. This will occur shortly when the passage of the miscellaneous provisions, establishment of the Borough of Diego Martin and the Borough of Siparia Bill 2021 will, be debated in this honorable House and seeks to elevate these regions into borough status. Madam Speaker, what better way to usher in the reform than to recognize these two boroughs? The new borough status represents a second phase of the local government reform strategy and would see the government making good on the Prime Minister's promise to businesses of these regions by confinement of the borough status as expressed in the motion passed at their statutory meetings, respectively on May 2nd and January 21st, 2019. Madam Speaker, it has been 33 years since there was any upliftment in status for a municipal corporation, and this government believes that this would complement the reform initiative by creating additional opportunities for these regions, given their economic and development profile. Madam Speaker, what this means is that by the time the EBC is legally obligated to produce the 11th report, they would be referring to the boroughs of Digo Martin and the borough of Siparia. Madam Speaker, the changes recommended by the EBC in the 10th report involves adjustments to 2 of the boundaries of the 12 electoral districts across the electoral areas of Shogunas, Point Fortin, Cuva, Tabaki Talparo, Pinal Debe, Siparia, and Miraro Rio Claro. It also involves the creation of 2 additional electoral districts in the electoral areas of Cuva, Tabaki Talparo, and Miraro Rio Claro, as well as changes to the names of the 5 electoral districts within these electoral areas. Madam Speaker, in proposing these changes that I just referred to, the EBC was guided by rule numbers 1, 2.1, and 3 of the second schedule of the Act, in respect of the determination of the boundaries of the regional electoral districts, and rule number 4 in respect to the municipal electoral areas. Madam Speaker, Rule 2.1 sets out the guiding principles for determination in the number of electoral districts in a regional electoral area in Trinidad. Madam Speaker, Rule number 2 provides that there shall be in every electoral area a basic of 4 electoral districts. To this basic number shall be added the number obtained by individuals and electoral areas by 15,000. But where in any electoral area the electorate is less than 15,000, there shall be 5 electoral districts. More than 15,000, any residual left after dividing by 15,000 shall be treated as 15,000, and 1 electoral district shall be added. Madam Speaker, according to the Commission, the electoral area of Trinidad on which the 10th report was based is 1,087,835 persons, as appears on the Commission's record as May 14, 2021. The 9th report was based on an electorate of 1,063,771 persons, according to its record as of April 11, 2017. This represents an increase of 24,064 persons, or approximately 2.2% over the previous total. If we compare the change in the electorate of each electoral area, in this case, Cuva, Tabaki, Talparo, we see that the electorate reported in the 9th report of 147,000 438 increased to 152 and 32 in the 10th report. By simply adding Rule 2.1, example beginning with a basic 4 electoral district, dividing the electorate by 15,000 and adding 1 district for any reside left, we saw that 1 additional electoral district was required. A similar result was also obtained when applying to the rule to the regional electorate of the Mayaro Rio Claro, where the EBC reported an increase in the electorate from 29,511 to the 9th report of 30,141 in the 10th report. As such, 1 additional electoral district was required to be created. No changes were required on the other 7 regional electoral areas, as they are still within the legal threshold. Madam Speaker, the other guiding rules in the EBC determining electoral districts and the preparation of this report are Rule 1, which provides that the number of electors in each electoral district of a regional electoral area shall be the number obtained by the application of Rule 2. But in no case shall the number of electors exceed or be less than the number of electors in any other electoral district of that electoral area by more than 25%. Rule 3, which provides that in the division of electoral districts, natural boundaries such as major highways and rivers shall be used wherever possible. Rule 4 applies to the municipal electoral areas and provides the number of electors in an electoral district of a municipal electoral area shall be the number obtained by dividing the number of electors in that electoral area by the number of electoral districts shown opposite the name of that electoral area in the 3rd part of 1 of the 1st schedule. But the Commission may vary such number provided that in no case shall the number of electors exceed or be less than the number of electors in any other electoral district of that electoral area by more than 25%. Madam Speaker, this is the law that the EBC used to guide the review process and as stated by the Commission in this report. Geographic information systems were also utilized to objectively determine the adjustments to the electoral district to avoid splitting of communities. We commend this approach, and it demonstrates that Trinidad and Tobago has made significant advancement in the use of spatial and geographical technology to ensure more objective outcome from this review. Madam Speaker, simply put, the EBC is required to review the 139 electoral districts within the municipal and regional areas of Trinidad and Tobago where necessary. Proposed boundary changes to ensure that 25% threshold is maintained. This was done, Madam Speaker, and after application, the formula alterations were recommended to 4 boundaries within the municipal electoral area of Chaguanas, 2 boundaries within the municipal electoral area of Point Fortin, 8 boundaries within the regional electoral area of Cuva, Tabaki, Talparo, 4 boundaries within the regional electoral area of Mayaro, Rio Claro, 2 boundaries within the regional electoral area of Siparia, and 2 boundaries within the regional electoral area of Pinal Debe. In all, 22 changes were proposed, and these are set out in Table 1 of the 10th report. In the case of Chaguanas, where the number of electoral districts is fixed by law, the highest electorate Enterprise North Esmeralda was 9,833, while the lowest electorate, Felicity Endeavour, was 7,632. This resulted in a difference of 2,201. The highest electorate was 29% above the lowest, and the lowest was 22% below the highest. This was outside of the 25% threshold. Adjustments, therefore, had to be made to the boundaries of the electoral districts of Charleville, Felicity, Endeavour, Enterprise North, Esmeralda, and Montrose to ensure conformity with the rules. And the situation in Point Fortin was also similar, as the highest electorate, Egypt, was 3,522, and the lowest, Newlands Mahaica, was 2,573. There was a 37% difference between the highest and the lowest, and adjustments were made to the boundaries of two districts of Egypt and Newlands Mahaica to facilitate conformity with the law. After the EBC adjusted, the highest electorate was 3,298 in Egypt, and the lowest 2,718 in Captiville, Fanny Village, bringing them within the prescribed limits. Having regard to the addition of one electoral district in Couva, Tabaki, Talparo, and Mayaro, Rio Claro, respectively, adjustments had to be made to facilitate the creation of the new district in these electoral areas. Given the new configuration, the highest electorate in Couva, Tabaki, Talparo now stands at 10,881, Caparo, Mamaral, while the lowest is 8,884, Couva East, Balmain. Similarly, the adjustment proposed in the respect of Mayaro, Rio Claro, resulted in the highest electorate being 4,639, Rio Claro South, and the lowest 3,919, Kokal Mafikin, within the 25% limit. Madam Speaker, the above adjustments and those applicable to the regions of Siparia and Pinal Debe are all set out in detail in the 10th report, and further particulars on the Commission's recommendation, including maps. Each of the 141 electoral districts are contained in the appendices of the draft order. Madam Speaker, I can now summarize these changes by saying that there will be two new electoral districts, one in Couva, Talparo, Tabaki Talparo, known as Couva West, Roystonia, and one in the electoral district in Mayaro, Rio Claro, known as Mayaro North. Madam Speaker, we can also expect name changes in the electoral areas of Couva, Tabaki, Talparo, and Mayaro, Rio Claro as follows. The electoral district of Balmain, Calcutta No. 2 has been renamed Couva East, Balmain. The electoral district of California, Point Lisas has been renamed Savanetta, Point Lisas. The electoral district of Cali Bay, Calcutta No. 3, McBean, has been renamed Calcutta No. 3, McBean. In Mayaro, there will be two name changes. The electoral district of Mayaro Guayari has been renamed Mayaro South Guayari, and the electoral district of Rio Claro South, Cats Hill, has been renamed Rio Claro South. Madam Speaker, in accordance with the law, the reports of the EBC are required to be submitted not less than 2 or more than 3 years from the date of submission of its last report. The 9th report of the EBC for the purposes of local government elections was submitted to the Minister on June 12, 2017. And as such, the 10th report became due on June 11, 2020. Madam Speaker, as you may recall, that in 2020, Trinidad and Tobago, like the rest of the world, was still reeling from the devastation and deliberations of the effects arising of COVID-19 pandemic. The public health crisis necessitated the enactment of the public health regulation, stay-at-home orders, state of emergency, mandatory closure of offices, staff rotation, staff quarantine, and other safety protocols, all of which had to be in effect of limiting the delivery of services and the ability of the EBC to complete the review. Consequently, by virtue of Section 22 of the Miscellaneous Amendment Number 2 Act 2020, dated July 3, 2020, the period for submission of the EBC report was extended from June 11, 2020 to June 11, 2021. Madam Speaker, having regard to the extended date for submission of the report, the EBC acted in full compliance and submitted the 10th report on June 10, 2021. The 10th report was accepted by the Cabinet on July 15, 2021, and the draft order was submitted to the Clerk of the House on August 18, 2021, for laying before the House of Representatives. The last sitting of the House was on July 9, 2021, and sittings resumed on August 25, 2021. Government's legislative priority and the state of emergency as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic resulting in the order being laid on February 4, 2022. Madam Speaker, when the term of local government bodies was lawfully extended on November 7, 2022, from the triennial to the quadrennial term, Madam Speaker, the EBC has discharged their obligation and done what was required in terms of the presentation of their report. The adoption of this report is what allows us to move the process forward. The PNM's first course of action is to ensure that all legal requirements are in place. We make sure to check all our boxes to be certain that we act within the confines of the law. Madam Speaker, the PNM government knows that it's the right to have local government elections within the new reformed local government system in place. Madam Speaker, we share our vision with the population in 2015, and now we are ushering a modernized local government system. We have already begun the transformation process. Full proclamation of the Local Government Reform Act is coming. We are in high gear preparing all stakeholders for the reform. Madam Speaker, we are operating the law. We are putting new systems and administrative structures in place for the municipal corporations. New systems, new rules, new processes, skilled people, new machinery, everything that is needed to deliver on our promise, to deliver a transformed system to local government. That is what the citizens voted for when they gave us the mandate in 2015 and 2020. Effective representation, and we will continue to deliver. Madam Speaker, the government moves to uphold the recommendations of the Elections and Boundaries Commission, an independent body acting in compliance with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. We will hold the next local government election in a reformed system of local government. We will hold the next election within the borough of Diego Martin and the borough of Siparia, lawfully in existence. With the adoption of this report, the way will be cleared for an election, and I encourage those on the other side to support it. We expect that the election will be held, not before it is due. And so with these words, I recommend the adoption of this report. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honourable members, I will now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that a draft of the Elections and Boundaries Commission, Local Government and Tobago House of Assembly Order 2021 be approved. Member for St. Augustine.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As I begin today, in the name of the most mighty and most merciful God, I bring greetings to the Muslim community here in Trinidad and Tobago and around the world who begin fasting for the holy month of Ramadan. It is believed that the Holy Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad during the holy month of Ramadan. It is a month of self-reflection, improvement, true devotion to Allah, when Muslims fast, pray, and give charity. Ramadan Mubarak to our Muslim brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, it is said by Sidney J. Harris that democracy is the only system that persists in asking the powers that be whether they are the powers that ought to be. Today, the House of Representatives debates the approval of the draft Elections and Boundaries Commission, Local Government and Tobago House of Assembly Order 2021, which was laid before this House on the 4th day of February 2022, just over a year ago. Madam Speaker, I thank the Minister, who is Acting Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, for reading the report into the record during his contribution. It was an inert contribution, given in a sphere or bubble that really failed to acknowledge that it was under the tenure of the said Senator, the Honorable Haji Kazim Hussein, as Minister of Local Government, that a major blunder occurred where this report is concerned. The 9th report, the last report previous to this one, was submitted in July 2017. The 10th report was then due in July of 2020. As permitted in the Act, the EBC requested an extension of 1 year, and so the report became due in July of 2021. It is our understanding that the EBC submitted the report to the Minister as required by law on or before August 18, 2021, but it was not laid in Parliament. As the Minister explained, Parliament was on recess, but the Parliament resumed in September of 2021. The report was not laid. October, November, December, January passed, and no report was laid under the said Minister, Senator, the Honorable Haji Kazim Hussein. And he made his contribution. I don't know if maybe he expected us to forget because it was some time ago. But we cannot forget these things, as this bill is an important part of the process that guards the democratic rights of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It should not be taken lightly. Madam Speaker, it was only when the Leader of Opposition threatened legal action against the government that a supplemental order paper was circulated, and the report was laid on the 4th of February. So we, as a parliament, as responsible guardians of democracy in this country, Trinidad and Tobago, cannot pretend that it was just a normal administrative laying of the report. There were errors that should not occur. And at the time, the opposition asked, what was the reason for the delay? What was the reason for the oversight? What was the reason for not double-checking that this very important report is in fact laid as is required by law? We said it might be incompetence. We said maybe, they just forget, they don't know the job too well, and maybe it just slipped them. We said it might be that they just don't care. The PNM has a history of not caring for local government elections. Or we said that it might be that the government is attempting to suppress democracy. Today, Madam Speaker, we know what the answer is. Back then, the public did not know that the government intended to postpone local government elections and suppress democracy in Trinidad and Tobago. That reality, that fact, has now been revealed. And the manner in which the announcement came was really unfortunate. But it doesn't matter what the explanation is. The fact is that the history of the government, when it comes to keeping local government elections on time, is terrible. Under the Prime Minister Patrick Manning, the elections was postponed 4 times. Under the current government, there were at least 2 occasions when the opposition had to either take legal action by sending pre-action protocol letters or threaten to take legal action for by-elections to call where local government seats became vacant, where a councillor passed away, and so on. And it shows that the PNM continues to have a disregard for allowing the voice of the people of Trinidad and Tobago to be heard. On this occasion, I am certain that that fear is based in the discontent that the population is expressing towards this government, the dissatisfaction with so many failures on crime, on food prices, and so on. But Madam Speaker, I don't want to digress too much from the report. Why is this report important? The report is important because it sets out the boundaries for seats in the regional corporation. If any changes are made or proposed by the boundary, in boundaries, of course it has to get further approval. But it is critical for citizens, first of all, to know where they are being placed to vote and the impact that might have on their choice. It is critical for political parties to plan their strategy for local government elections. And if an election is due and a government has that report undercover, not being laid, not being made public, of course they are at an unfair advantage to the rest of the population, because this information would be with the government and not with the opposition, other political parties, or with the citizens themselves. What does it do? The Commission would usually define and review the boundaries of each electoral district, each electoral area, and make recommendations for changes. The minister who spoke before me has saved me from reading into the record the process by which the number of electors are determined. Any one of us could read that online. But what I find curious is that the minister mentioned the new boroughs of Siparia and Diego Martin being created. And he put it forward as though it was an achievement of the government. Madam Speaker, the change of name is a superficial change, and it is just a ploy to pretend as though the government has an achievement. It is nothing else. When I first heard of the move to have 2 new boroughs in Trinidad and Tobago, as a person coming from local government, I was excited. I do believe that there are so many areas that require that development focus to create a borough, to take the town center and develop it in a way to support local economic development, to support development.
So, member, I'll just remind you of Standing Order 48.3. Okay, now I know you'll be saying you're rebutting. Mention was made of these boroughs that will be created, but I'm not going to allow you to debate something that we just finished debating.
Yes.
Okay? So
Certainly.
please be minded.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I will rush to the part now where I'm tying it into the EBC report. The creation of a borough is, in terms of the EBC's jurisdiction, very relevant because the EBC has a role to determine the size of the electorate in the 3 tiers of local government. That is, the size of the electorate for a city, the size of the electorate for a borough, and the size of electorate for a regional corporation. The minister did not seem to express that appreciation, the role of the EBC in allocating the electorate in a borough, town, and region. The EBC, in my view, should have been a key stakeholder in consultation, just as when the Municipal Corporations Act would have been.
Again, I remind you of Standing Order 48.3.
Yes.
We are not here debating the creation of any borough.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So I'll ask you to please not continue along that track.
Yes.
And let's get on with what we're dealing with here, please.
Okay, thank you. Madam Speaker, the EBC report that came out after new boroughs were formed would indicate the size of the electors. The most recent instance of that we had was in Shoguanas Borough, when Shoguanas became the new borough. And so the subsequent EBC report reflected the new boundaries, as well as the Municipal Corporations Act at the time, which was amended to indicate the new boundaries. The size of the electorate would also have been different. Now, Madam Speaker, while I expressed I acknowledge the minister indicating the formula that the EBC uses. What I didn't hear is a connection in terms of how that formula will apply in this instance. All of us are stakeholders in democracy. All of us have an interest in ensuring that the people of Trinidad and Tobago has a say in who is selected to be representatives. The size of the electorate, as outlined in the report, does have an impact on who the citizens end up with as their local government councillor or as their member of parliament. The size of the electorate in the regional corporations outlined in this 10th report of the EBC shows the continuation of a disparity that has been highlighted more and more in recent times. And that is the size of the electorate. We acknowledge that the size of the electorate in a city, in a borough, and in a region will be different, vastly different. What is still happening currently is that the size of the electorate in certain regional corporations are very different to the size in other corporations. Notwithstanding that the EBC has guidelines, which was read out here, the size of the electorate now impacts on how many votes are required to win that seat. And whereas you may have, I want to compare two boroughs for illustration. the size of the electorate outlined in Chaguanas Borough, where one of the changes in this report is recommended, compared to an established borough of Point Fortin. I'm taking these two for illustration because in the report, an explanation or justification is made for the change in Chaguanas Borough, an adjustment in the seat based on the number of electors there. And I'm taking Point Fortin because there's also a borough. The size of the electorate in one seat in Point Fortin is tremendously smaller than that of Chaguanas. If we would want to have a fair and a consistent assignment of the number of electors, I would expect that effort would be made to ensure that all the boroughs have a similar number of electors. What happens now is that in Chaguanas, where one seat has as many as 8,000 voters or electors, and a councillor in that seat would be required to get about 4,000 votes to win. In Point Fortin, if they were contesting there with that number of votes, they would win about 3 seats with that number of votes. The member for Point Fortin is smiling because he was a mayor of Point Fortin, and he knows and understands that the size of the electorate in that borough is much smaller than the size of the electorate in Chaguanas. So what happens is that when the PNM wins in the borough of Point Fortin, whether the EBC report gives them 6 seats or 8 seats, had the electorate been the same size in Chaguanas, the UNC would have won about 15 or 18 seats. And the PNM would continue to boast about how many seats they have. And then when we examine the number of votes, it is possible for the PNM to win more seats or more regions and get less votes. And that has in fact happened. Is that a true reflection of democracy? Is that a true reflection of the voice of the people, the choice of the people? It is not. But it has worked to the advantage of the PNM for many years, and so they continue to encourage and endorse and encourage it. Madam Speaker, the EBC, the Election and Boundaries Commission, is by law an independent body, by law, an independent body. And so it should not be subjected to the political whims of whoever is in government. But certainly, even if a person is serving in the EBC based on whatever recommendation, they're serving in the EBC, right? The question has to be asked about association.
All right, I've given you tremendous leeway. We are debating a particular report.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes.
This is not about a justification about whether it should be a borough or it shouldn't be a borough. It's not about that.
No, it's not.
Okay? There are very specific recommendations.
Yes.
You have your ordinary time ends at 3:10. The ordinary time, you're entitled to 15 more minutes. I would ask you kindly to condescend on the report
Yes.
for the rest of the time that you have left.
Yes.
I'm not going to warn you again.
Yes.
I've been really patient.
Yes. Certainly. Madam Speaker, if I am, when I said the word association, if it was interpreted, yes.
I have already ruled. If I didn't use that word, I'm telling you I'm ruling now. I'm not talking about association. I'm talking about the track you're going on. Please find your way.
Madam Speaker, I have moved past the point of the size of the electorate.
And please, don't answer me back. Just move on. Please move on. Don't answer me back.
I am now moving on to the independence of the EBC, the Elections and Boundaries.
And that does not arise under this report. Please move on.
Yes. Madam Speaker, the EBC makes recommendation on boundaries, and some of the boundaries recommended, because of my practical knowledge on the ground, I wonder how pragmatic some of the recommendations in this 10th report are. And there's a theory that persons who are serving in independent offices, whether it be judges and so on, ought to keep themselves disconnected from.
Member, determine whether you want to take your seat or you want to use the rest of your time. Make that decision now.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I would just very quickly summarize to say that the boundaries recommended in the report, there is an opportunity for review to make them more practical. More practical in that traditionally, boundaries, natural boundaries such as rivers or major roads would have been used. I have observed and I have outlined in my notes a number of instances where small villages are split by a boundary that puts half of the village in one electoral district that is not socially a part of that area. Compared to, if I have to be specific, I will use a boundary in the Tunapuna-Piako region, where previously the boundary would have been the Mausika River, and that separated the Dabadi and Mausika areas from the Karapu area. And when the change was made, I'm explaining for illustration.
In this report, no change is necessary to the Tunapuna. So you're not talking about this report. No, we're talking about this report.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So you're giving, by example, this
Yes.
report.
Yes, because I want to compare a change that was made in a previous, in the 9th report, and compare it to a change that was made in the 10th report. So that change that I've described in the Karapu area, where a road was used instead, a road that falls and splits a village, now puts a little sliver of a community.
Talking about the 9th report, the 8th report.
Yes.
Please develop your point on the 10th report. As I've indicated to you before, my reading of this, if you're talking about Tunapuna-Piako, no change necessary. That's what I see. So maybe you might like to guide me to the particular page, because maybe I've missed the page.
No, Madam Speaker.
Okay.
That
so
recommendation.
Just be guided what I said. We're not going back. You would have had your opportunity then. If you didn't use it.
So thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. I was just using that for illustration because I wanted to talk about a change in the 10th.
Get on with it, with what you're referring to in this report, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the EBC has a care of duty to ensure that electoral areas for local government elections preserve local representation in its truest form. For that reason, I would really like to see for consideration a moving away from that splitting of communities, as I observe happen in the Shoguanas borough in this 10th report, and allow, because we speak so much about local government being about strengthening communities and so on, but the changes does not really reflect that. The changes made in the borough of Shoguanas, where we have the new boundaries, where we have small communities being split, and in fact we have a polling division that was actually subdivided. Of course, that happens because the population has grown in that polling division. But what we have to, I think, is to implore here in Parliament for the EBC to take note of areas where communities are split. And Madam Speaker, while the EBC must remain free from political influence, perhaps of course it remains open to input from stakeholders and citizens. I am aware that the EBC does meet with political parties because it conducts elections, and political parties are stakeholders. And the United National Congress did meet with the EBC as the PNM did, and this matter would have been pointed out to the EBC. And I am disappointed because I was part of that meeting. I'm disappointed that those recommendations are not reflected in this report. The recommendation from the Opposition United National Congress is not to tell the EBC where the boundary should be. It is a principle that the boundary should allow communities to stay together. It should allow communities to have representation in a way that boosts their development and would also have an impact on, for instance, where they have specific things that are organic to that community when it comes to local tourism and local economic development opportunities and so on. So that, Madam Speaker, is the point I was making when I drew the illustration of areas being split around what I think are unnatural boundaries. Some of the recommendations here are similar to recommendations in the previous reports where there could have been smarter choices when it comes to the road or water course that is selected for the demarcation, the different boundaries. Madam Speaker, I spoke on the issue of in the bill for the creation of the boroughs, and I am not going into the principle of creating a borough as in terms of the political decision. I mentioned before that the decision to create boroughs will have an impact on what the EBC does. Of course, I don't know if the government may be in a position, but later on, the EBC will have to be engaged now to consider whether the electorate of the new boroughs will become in the next report.
Member for Shigona, member for St. Augustine, you found yourself there again. Please, not again. We're not talking about that today.
Thank you. Madam Speaker.
Member for Siparia, member for Naparima, member for Uruka Maloney. I'm sure if you all wish to join the debate, when the time comes, you'll catch my eyes. You'll certainly get the time.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, the issue of the number of persons in each electoral area recommended in this report will also have an impact on the decisions that the government makes when it comes to funding. Well, it should have it should be a guideline. We see in each borough, borough, city, and regional corporation, the borough of Point Fortin has a total electorate of 17,344. In Tunapuna region, the electorate there is 179,435, so roughly 180,000 electors. The Tunapuna Piako has 10 times the size of the electorate in Point Fortin. That, of course, would impact on the number of seats. The Chaguanas Borough now has, the Couva Regional Corporation now has an additional seat. They too have a very big population and an even larger geographic area. The number of councillors in Couva Regional Corporation is recommended to be increased in this 10th report of the Election and Boundaries Commission. Is there any relation between the size of electorate and funding? That question is for the government to answer. When the election and boundaries make their recommendations, as they have done in this report, when there is a recommendation for an additional seat, as they have made in several instances, in Mayaro, for instance, in Couva region, for instance, it indicates that there is an increase in the population. An increase in the population means an increase in the demand on the regional corporation for resources. Does the government, does the Ministry of Finance take into consideration the size of the electorate when allocating resources? I have done a comparison of the funding allocated to each regional corporation, and this report, Madam Speaker, would now be new information to guide, and I want to ask the Minister of Finance and the public servants within that ministry to give considerations to the recommendations in this 10th report, where there are numerous regional corporations whose electorate has increased, and therefore the need for additional resources has increased.
The original speaking time is spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to complete your presentation if you wish.
Thank you. You may proceed. Madam Speaker, this motion requires a simple majority. The government, in my view, has missed the opportunity in this parliamentary term to implement constitutional protection for local government and local government elections. The fact that we are debating this report more than 1 year after it was due reminds us of the whim of the political directorate, whoever may be in government, to postpone local government elections, postpone the debate on the local government report from the EBC and so on. Madam Speaker, we do not trust the PNM. The government has not accounted properly for their decision to defer local government elections. Yes.
Please get on track with this. Please.
Madam Speaker,
I know you have ruled, but I was going to raise the sub judice rule that matters before the court right now.
So, member, you're familiar with that? Please move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do not intend to get into the matter further. Madam Speaker, it is my opinion that this government is really afraid of calling the local government elections. Local government elections are due, and not bringing this report on time, to me, was an indication that they plan to postpone the election. Governments in Trinidad and Tobago have to move away from interfering with local government just because it doesn't have constitutional protection. We in the United National Congress had elections, win, lose or draw, they were called on time. And that preservation of democracy is something that the PNM has failed to do. Madam Speaker, there was a little quote I wanted to share. I found it was interesting. It says, "A man without a vote is a man without protection." And Trinidad and Tobago needs protection from this PNM government. I thank you.
Member for Port of Spain South.
Madam Speaker, as I approached the podium and listened to the honourable member who preceded me, complaining that the local government elections has been delayed, I recalled, Madam Speaker, that in incarnation, when the honourable members on the other side were in government, they delayed the national general elections for over 5 months. Yes. So, Madam Speaker, that being said, Madam Speaker, I would like, Madam Speaker,
Member for St. Augustine.
Madam Speaker.
Please don't disturb the proceedings. Continue.
Madam Speaker, what we're about today, having regard to the nature of this debate and the subject matter and its significance as it relates to the strengthening of our democracy and constitutional arrangements, I would like to take an approach to this debate in a non-traditional manner. Consequently, Madam Speaker, I would seek to give some context to this order that we are debating now, so that the public can be meaningfully engaged and apprised of how this government is undertaking its sworn duties pursuant to the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago and its constitutional arrangements. Madam Speaker, I will attempt to go through the various stages and provisions in order to bring an understanding and appreciation of this order that we are debating today and how we have arrived at this juncture with the recommendations of the EBC. Madam Speaker, I start on the premise that the Election and Boundaries Commission is not just a creature of statute, but it's a creature of the Constitution established under Section 71 of the Republican Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. And most importantly, Madam Speaker, when I looked at the 10th report, it is in line with the provisions of Section 71, 1 and 2 of the Constitution, which gives for the composition of the Elections and Boundary Commission 1 chairman and 4 others. Madam Speaker, if one examines the 10th report at the final page, Roman numeral 29, you will see, Madam Speaker, that it was a plenary commission that signed this 10th report that led to the bringing to this House of the order. The 10th report of the EBC was submitted to the Honourable Minister of Rural Development and Local Government on the 10th of June 2021. And Madam Speaker, this is very significant because what we can say about the submission of this report, and we say it both in fact and intent, that the EBC is an independent entity enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago and protected by the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. Contrary to what is being bandied about, and what was bandied about by the honourable member who spoke before me, Madam Speaker, the members of the EBC are appointed in consultation with the leader of the opposition. And it is supposed to be, and it remains to our mind, an independent body devoid of any political connections and devoid of any nepotism that was being shrouded in a submission by the honourable member who spoke before me. It's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, because without a shred of evidence, these irresponsible statements can be made and go unnoticed. I want to put it on record that in order to appoint the EBC, there's a process of consultation that happened. The next point I would want to make, Madam Speaker, about this report is that this report is the work of an entity who was responsible for its own agenda. The EBC carries out its redivision relative to electoral boundaries in accordance with the Election, Boundaries and Commissions Act. This is just one of their key mandatory functions under the Act. And Madam Speaker, one of those key mandatory statutory functions was responsible for the presentation of the 10th report, which led to the creation of the order that is being debated today. Section 4.1, Madam Speaker, of the Act is very opposite to this debate because, Madam Speaker, it gives the remit of the EBC in undertaking the exercise that it did in order to arrive at this point. Madam Speaker, Section 4.1 reads as follows. The Commission shall define and review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which an electoral area is or is to be divided, and shall submit to the Minister reports either A, showing the constituencies into which it recommends that an electoral area should be divided in order to give effect to the rules set out in the second schedule, or B, stating that in the opinion of the Commission, no alteration is required to the existing number of boundaries of electoral districts in order to give effect to the said rules. So what is important, Madam Speaker, in my respectful view, is this. Section 4.1 makes it mandatory for the EBC to have two functions, which it did in this matter: define and review. And this order is the product of a definition and a review of what existed between 2017 and 2021. And this is what the EBC did. They defined and reviewed, and thereafter, Madam Speaker, when the process was completed, in order to be faithful to Section 4B of the Act and A, the EBC reported its findings to the Honourable Minister. In its reporting, the EBC had an option. They could have made no recommendation under Section 4.1b, or they could have given, or they could have opined that alterations were required to the electoral boundaries. And that is what they did in the 10th report. There is nothing occult, there is nothing hidden, there is nothing, Madam Speaker, that is sinister, nothing that you can say, do not trust the PNM government. There's no basis for that, because this was an independent report pursuant to the statutory duty of the commissions. Madam Speaker, Section 4.2b required the report to be submitted within a 3-year period. Madam Speaker, a lot of griping was made about the Honourable Minister's submission to the report in Parliament, maybe 3 or 4 months late. But what they didn't say, Madam Speaker, is that the last report, the 9th report of the Commission, which is dated the 12th of June 2017, that report was due on the 11th of June 2020. But, Madam Speaker, contemporaneous events did not make that possible. And in keeping with the rule of law, what did this government do? The Miscellaneous Act, the Miscellaneous Amendment Act of 2020, extended the time for the submission of this report to the 11th of June 2021. Madam Speaker, if I may just refer to the front page of this report, it is dated June 10th, 2021, within the time allotted for the submission of the report to the Honourable Minister. So for avoidance of any doubt whatsoever, the report which forms the basis of this order being debated today was submitted on time in keeping with the legislative remit. In this 10th report, Madam Speaker, the Commission made 15 recommendations. I will break it up into 15 recommendations. And what is important, Madam Speaker, is this, because I now want to do a comparator with the report that was submitted and the order that we are debating to show that the Honourable Minister and this government is faithful to the report submitted to him on the 10th of June. Madam Speaker, I would turn, and for reference, for those who want to be edified and who want to follow and be serious about the business of this House, I turn, Madam Speaker, respectfully to page Roman numeral let me remember my Roman numerals, Madam Speaker, 28. And at Roman numeral 28, these are the recommendations in the report. 1, the creation of an additional electoral district in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Couva, Tabaquite, Talparo by virtue of the application of Rule 2.1 of the second schedule of the Act. And this new electoral district be called Couva West Restonia. Madam Speaker, 2, the creation of an additional electoral district in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Mayaro Rio Claro by virtue of the application of Rule 2.1 of the second schedule of the Act aforesaid, and this new electoral district be called Mayaro North. Changes in the boundaries. 4 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Municipal Corporation of Chaguanas. 2 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Municipal Corporation of Point Fortin. 8 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Couva, Tabaquite, Talparo. D, 4 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Mayaro Rio Claro. E, 2 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Pinal de Bay. F, 2 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Siparia. Changes in the names of 3 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Couva, Tabaquite, Talparo, and B, 2 electoral districts in the electoral area of the Regional Corporation of Mayaro, Rio Claro. Madam Speaker, when I did the comparator, and I looked at the order, if we look, Madam Speaker, at the third recital in the order, the third recital in the order is in pari materia. It mirrors exactly the recommendations made by the EBC in its 10th report at page Roman numeral 28, paragraph 14. What it means, Madam Speaker, what it means is that the government, because, Madam Speaker, I have looked at the legislation, and it seems to my mind that there may, for good reason, that will be explained to the House, a deviation if there's not agreement. But, Madam Speaker, exactly what was submitted as the recommendations by the EBC on the 10th of June 2021 are exactly what has been submitted in this order before this Honorable House. So I wonder then, what is the purpose? What is all this brouhaha being bandied about by the honorable members on the other side? They will not tell the country that the honorable minister was faithful to his mandate. They will not tell the country, Madam Speaker, that what was recommended by the independently, constitutionally established body charged with the duty of elections and boundaries, exactly what was recommended is what this government has brought to this honorable House. Why wouldn't they say that? Madam Speaker, you know why they wouldn't say that? Because they always want to attack institutions. Bearing in mind the sub-judice rule, bearing in mind, and I will not be pointed at, Madam Speaker, bearing in mind the challenges that this government has to face in court every Monday morning. I know the sub-judice rule, but just to say, Madam Speaker, just to say that all this talk about the government being illegal and not acting in accordance or trampling on the rights of local government elections, Madam Speaker, all I would say is the matter brought against that decision was lost all the way up to the Court of Appeal and was heard at the Privy Council on the 15th of March 2023, and a decision from the highest court of the land will come in short thrift. But as it stands now, Madam Speaker, as it stands now, my answer to the spurious allegation made by the Honourable Member for St. Augustine is contained in Civil Appeal number 293 of 2022. And this is the words of the learned justice in the Court of Appeal. The words of the judge is as follows, Madam Speaker. This is the law.
And let's move on.
Yes,
okay,
please,
I think
Madam
you're
Speaker,
studying.
I will move on. But for those who need edification, copies are available both hard and online. Suffice it to say, Madam Speaker, that the decision of the government has been upheld by the highest court of the land to date. That being said, Madam Speaker, there's an issue raised about the late submission to the Parliament of the recommendations in the 10th report. Not at all holding brief to defend the Honourable Minister, but, Madam Speaker, there were over 15 recommendations, and some had far-reaching implications. So forgive the Honourable Minister if he took his time to consider before bringing it here. When I was listening to the submission, I remember a word. I cannot remember who used this famous phrase. I will ask the Honourable Member for San Fernando. Hurry dog does eat raw meat. And, oh, yes, he may actually, Madam Speaker, all the talk coming from Naparima, he cannot answer the submission that hurry dog will eat raw meat. We needed time to consider the recommendations in order to bring it before this House to have a resolution of a most important issue, Madam Speaker, when the Honourable Member for St. Augustine, at some time they may get serious, Madam Speaker, when the Honourable Member made her presentation, she did not mention to this Honourable House that as soon as all, Madam Speaker, things were put in place, this order was brought before this House, and we are here debating it. And we are debating it, Madam Speaker, as it relates to an entity and an institution that is not just independent, Madam Speaker, but is protected under the Constitution and cannot be interfered with willy-nilly. So, that being said, Madam Speaker, it is my respectful view that having regard to the history of this order, which I have gone through, having regard to the constitutional remit of the EBC in its establishment, having regard to its statutory function, which is mandatory under sections 4(1), 2, and 3, this order, having regard to its contents, which mirror exactly the recommendations made by the EBC in its 10th report, that being on time, and having regard, Madam Speaker, to this, when you look at the new districts, the changes, Madam Speaker, we can make a legitimate submission that the creation of these new districts fairly represent communities and it is supposed to avoid political contentiousness, but the other side can't avoid it. They can't. History teaches us, Madam Speaker, that the independence of the commissions can help avoid favoritism. We have it enshrined. We have a process. They still come here and say favoritism. We say that this report is divorced from any political interference. The only reason it has gotten here, Madam Speaker, is because it was submitted to the Honourable Minister with no changes, exactly as the recommendations were made. It is submitted here in an order. And therefore, Madam Speaker, what is the other side really debating? What are they debating? There is nothing to debate about this other than say that the government is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is bringing legislation and bringing orders, Madam Speaker, that are in keeping with its mandate of good governance, a phrase that is alien to the other side. Madam Speaker, this is my contribution to this debate.
Member for Shigona, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute in this debate on the EBC's 10th report. Madam Speaker, as I rise this afternoon to contribute on this motion, which is rooted on the constitutional provisions, which was also expressed by the Acting Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, I am a bit perturbed and disappointed by the government's tardiness, which borders on ineptitude in tabling and subsequently debating the Elections and Boundaries Commission's EBC 10th report recommendation as contained herein. And you would have heard from the member for St. Augustine, who also put this across nicely. Madam Speaker, and you know what, Karma, the member for Port of Spain South who just spoke, indicated to this House that we should forgive the minister who presented. But Madam Speaker, karma is real. Karma is over real, you know, Madam Speaker. And the Acting Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, the Honorable Haji Kazim Hussein, presided over the failure of the tabling of this 10th EBC report. Madam Speaker, he ran, he hide, he duck, he bob, he weave. But Madam Speaker, karma dictates that he is compelled to table this same report today. Madam Speaker, the Acting Minister also spoke about local government elections. Madam Speaker, it is significant to remember that given the track record, or let's say the historical practices by the PNM government relative to the conduct of local government elections at best can only be described as abysmal. Madam Speaker, the member who just spoke would have stated at the beginning of his contribution that in 2020 we would have postponed the general election for over 5 months. Madam Speaker, let me remind that member that his government, his party, would have delayed the local government elections 4 times, Madam Speaker. And they would have delayed by elections twice in this country. The member claimed we delayed general elections. That is absolutely false. Madam Speaker, they have over their tenure in office repeatedly failed to hold local government elections, citing reform, as stated by the minister. A lot about reform today, measures as their justification for failing to adhere to the democratic principles enshrined. Madam Speaker, for the record, and the record speaks for itself, but I want to remind this House that within mere months of assuming office in 2010, the People's Partnership under the visionary, democratic and insightful leadership of the Honourable Member for Siparia held the long overdue local government elections, which was postponed since 2003. So, Madam Speaker, we on this side can hold our heads high since we respect the rule of law and the democratic principles, letting the people decide. We have never scuttled local government elections under the guise of reform. That is the remit and practice of those opposite, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I fully delve into the substantive aspects of my presentation, I want to highlight to this House, and by extension the population at large, that prior to 1976, that that is the advent of the Republican Constitution, there existed two entities, namely the Election Commission and the Boundaries Commission, which had separate and distinct responsibilities. However, Madam Speaker, they were then amalgamated to form the independent body, that is the Elections and Boundaries Commission, the EBC, which to a certain point, Madam Speaker, functioned reasonably well. And I want to restate reasonably well. Of course, in recent times, there seemed to be some clouding of perceived independence of this body. Madam Speaker, the reason I'm highlighting these things, these issues, is primarily that this motion in asking this House to accept the recommendations, which are as follows. Madam Speaker, the EBC report has recommended the following in brief, I would state: creation of an additional electoral district in 2 different regional corporations. It also recommended changes in the boundaries of 22 electoral districts, as well as changes in the names of electoral districts, changes in the definitions of electoral districts, changes in the delineations, as well as changes in the distributions of polling stations. However, before I proceed, I want to refer to the pronouncements made briefly, Madam Speaker, in this very House by the substantive Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, wherein, because the acting minister made mention of the Siparia and Diego Martin. I am not going into that. I'm just referring to the pronouncement made by the substantive minister, wherein in the aborted debate on borough status of Siparia Regional Corporation and Diego Martin on February 10th, the minister stated categorically, and I quote from the Hansard, "I want to state right now, absolutely nothing in this bill will cause any move to boundaries or other changes as a result of election matters." Madam Speaker, but the very motion we are here to debate reference the Siparia Regional Corporation, and which are as follows. Siparia, 9 electoral districts, a total electorate of 72,946. To transfer, Madam Speaker, 566 electors in PD 4800 from Erin to Cedrus, thereby reducing Erin to 7,561 and increasing Cedrus to 7,554. Madam Speaker, the records will reflect that Erin is a safe PNM electoral district, while Cedrus is a UNC-held electoral district. Madam Speaker, and as I relate to that, indeed, I want the minister, the substantive minister, to remember that this report was available to the government some time back. And if he had properly undertaken his research, such a statement in February of this year would not have been advanced, whether by accident or design. For the time being, I will give him the benefit of the doubt. Therefore, he is now aware of the facts, and I hope such an error does not reoccur. Madam Speaker, those opposite over the past few months have been advocating, or let me say linking, this EBC report with the promotion of local government reform agenda. Therefore, the question begs, Madam, what is the correlation with service delivery, productivity, greater resource allocation, and general local government improvement with the creation of the additional electoral districts in Mayaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation from 6 electoral districts to 7, Cuva Tabaki Talparo Regional Corporation from 14 electoral districts to 15, would the powers that be or the government equate this with commensurate increase in financial disbursements since the mere acknowledgement that an increase would definitely redound to increases in demand. Madam Speaker, what I find strange and needs to be immediately addressed is what constitutes an electoral district as it relates to the numerical composition. Madam Speaker, you see, when the contents of this report are digested, disaggregated, and poured over, it creates a sense of confusion, bewilderment, and further perplexes the brain as to what is the thought process on its submission. What is the ultimate objective of the submission? Madam Speaker, Couva Tabaqui Talparo Regional Corporation, with a proposed increase in electoral districts, moves from 14 to 15 with the creation of the new Couva West Roy-Estonia electoral district. This region, according to EBC figures, has a total average electorate of 152,032. Let us, for ease of reference, say 150,000. Thus, when divided by the total electoral districts, that is 15, means on an average 10,000 voters per electoral district. But conversely, Madam Speaker, Mayaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation, with the creation of the new Mayaro North electoral district, moves from 6 to 7 electoral districts with a total electorate of 30,141 voters. And for ease of reference, here again, let's say 4,500 voters on an average per electoral district. Madam Speaker, from these figures, one can clearly see a mismatch, since the councillor in the Couva Tabaqui Talparo Regional Corporation has to cater and service the needs of approximately 10,000 plus voters, whilst the councillor for Mayaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation is responsible for 4,500 voters, approximately 100% less. Madam Speaker, this anomaly must be explained and or addressed by the EBC as well, since clearly the workload and requirements are inconsistent and uneven for any prospective local government representatives. Madam Speaker, cognizant that the EBC report must be adopted prior to the impending local government elections, we must, on both sides of the political divide, review and reflect in our minds whether the fragmentation of the country in terms of electoral districts are in best interest of the country. Madam Speaker, I want to state yet again that I am a proud product of local government, and I boast when I say I am a political child nurtured in the vineyards of local government, namely the Chaguanas Borough Corporation. Therefore, when I speak, it is from a platform of functioning in such a developmental environment. Why not, and you know, sometimes one may ask the question when reading this report, why not expand the Chaguanas Borough Corporation from 8 to, let's say, 10 electoral districts? Since such a statement or thought is predicated by the fact that Chaguanas is the fastest growing commercial activity region in Trinidad and Tobago, with the suburban areas, even the rural areas now consumed by ongoing commercial activities. So it may be thought of, therefore, why not expand the municipality to what is commonly called the triangle nearing Chase Village, expand to Grand Bazaar, and to a designated point in and around the Longdonville region. What this would ultimately create, if thought about, is a reduction to a large portion of Couva Tabaqui Talparo Regional Corporation, and thus allowing for a reduced electorate and service area. Similarly, in the San Juan Laventille Regional Corporation, Madam Speaker, should this be adopted, one can clearly glean the commercial aspect therein. Madam Speaker, this radical outside-the-box thinking would realize in greater alignment of needs, services, and to a certain extent address the issues of rural-urban bias. And Madam Speaker, who knows, this can be adopted in other regions. And it's not a part of the report, so of course I would not state the other regions. Madam Speaker, these cosmetic tinkering by the EBC must be replaced by radical, realistic, pragmatic, and reasoned reviews on their part. Therefore, I suggest that the EBC conduct some real consultations with the population. Let it not be similar to what the RIC is now doing. Briefly, I state that. Madam Speaker, as I look to bring my contribution to a closure, I have some simple advice for the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. There is much work to be done in local government. Preaching reform and not implementing reform is a big issue in this country. Merely attempting to implement legislative changes does not address the institutional problems plaguing the system. Madam Speaker, there must be an awakening to a system which is much maligned and pilloried by the population at large. The apathy and disdain displayed towards local government is evident in voter turnout in the 2019 elections, whereby only 34.5% exercised their franchise by casting their ballots. Madam Speaker, this is an indictment of the entire system. Hence, the legislative reform packages cannot and will not address this apathy. From my own experiences, this apathy stems from the electorate inability to achieve results to their complaints. Therefore, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government and the government by extension continued emasculation of the local government system through the denial of resources by central government must be addressed. Madam Speaker, finally, I want to espouse the sentiments expressed by noted local government guru in one of his pieces headlined Challenges for Local Government in the Caribbean, Bishnu Raghunath, pages 105 to 106, wherein he stated, and I quote, "Local government in a small state context, therefore, is placed in a position of double jeopardy, unable to provide all the amenities and services on its own, and at the same time, unable to stave off central government's powerful moves to develop a clientelistic relationship with the citizenry." With these sentiments, Madam Speaker, I trust that the government would recognize the potential significance of local government. I thank you.
Member. Okay, member for W. O'Meara.
Madam Speaker, I am by profession a teacher. So it is with a teacher's eye I looked at the document, the EBC report. And while I am a literature teacher, I understand that the language of God is mathematics. So to me, Madam Speaker, this was simply mathematics, data-driven report. Madam Speaker, I want to congratulate the Elections and Boundaries Commission. And the reason why, Madam Speaker, it is the single most important democratic electoral machinery. It remains neutral in all matters, and it's our democratic standard bearer because it is their duty to make sure that the data is correct. Madam Speaker, today the report was presented in his usual efficient manner by the Honorable Kazim Hussain, the Acting Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, and now sitting before this House. Allow me to highlight some of the major aspects within this report and the great achievements that will happen because of this particular report. Now, Madam Speaker, my colleague for Chaguanas East did spend some time as a local government councillor and also a very brief time as mayor. So I think I have a little more experience when it comes to local government and a little more experience in understanding the importance of boundaries, as well as understanding that EBC's aim is not to divide, but to make sure communities are connected by proper representation. Madam Speaker, I was in what would be defined a marginal electoral seat for 3 successive terms. In 2013, 1 polling division was removed from Arima Central and placed in Arima Northeast. At no point in time, Madam Speaker, did I ask if it was a PNM polling division or a UNC polling division. What I knew, I had to represent and visit every single house in my electoral district. There are vast variables in electoral sizes versus representation and resources. As councillor, I would have had an area of 4,225. But my colleague in Karapu would represent 10,000 people. Madam Speaker, any councillor with his or her salt will appreciate the division of electoral boundaries so that resources can be allocated fairly. Madam Speaker, I noticed in the EBC report, they refer to geographic information systems. This is where the data comes in. I wish to define that the GIS system is very important. It is used worldwide. It is a tool system that captures and analyzes geographically referenced information. The framework uses data that is attached to a unique location and analyzes data that enables government, corporate entities to study maps and learn hidden geographical patterns. It is a robust solution for communities, cities, and countries. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to highlight that this level of technology was a major player and an asset to the process and the results reported. And I quote item 10, geographic information system was utilized to objectively determine adjustments to electoral district. Madam Speaker, this was not Vikey-Vike. Nobody sat in a bar and threw a dart. This was information that was collected and analyzed and reported. Madam Speaker, most countries, governments, and global businesses have already identified several benefits of the GIS. 1, improved decision-making. The GIS has assisted governments in making decisions regarding zone planning, urban planning, our natural resources, protecting the environment. Madam Speaker, it also helps us keep track of domestic migration. Towns grow, they expand, and sometimes people move on. It is the best way to record geographical data. Madam Speaker, again I quote, GIS helps in maintaining crucial geographical data and records all the old and new changes in different regions. So, Madam Speaker, cultural geographies like population census, land ownership, administrative boundaries. With the GIS, the government and the government organization can use mapping to engage with communities and improve policy making. Madam Speaker, in the very near future, smart cities will be using GIS for urban planning, disaster management, transportation management. The EBC has ensured that this country is on par with the best global practice. That is why we on this side of the House, Madam Speaker, celebrate this report. Madam Speaker, I wanted to expand on the technology of geographic information system, because it's clear that these adjustments were not decided by a drop of a hat or by a magician's magic ball. Not from any political standpoint. In fact, it's the application of the best science available globally. In our modern and fast-paced economy, this is what we need. When you are a counselor, you need equity. You need to make sure that all the burgesses are served. When I was a counselor, I taught as a counselor. When I was a mayor, I taught as a mayor. And as an MP, I must think for the 35,000 people under my care. With the information available, I would have been able to decide what area needed what, who needed support during COVID pandemic, food support, who needs water trucking, food distribution, simply because I am fully aware of all.
Madam Speaker, 48.1 relevance to the report, please.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, I stand here confident that this electoral adjustment in no way has compromised our democratic system. In fact, it has added more value on how we go about serving the electorate. You see, Madam Speaker, this report is not just for the purpose of elections and representations. It is really an advanced approach on how we should move in the future. Madam Speaker, the members on the other side referred to local government reform process. And they wanted to know what it meant. I did not expect them to understand what reform means, Madam Speaker. But I can explain that reform is necessary for anyone to move forward. Madam Speaker, I'm referring to reform because it was brought. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, for example, the selection of polling divisions were made on the electorate statistics of the electoral area of Chaguanas, ensuring that community fragmentation did not occur. Yet, Madam Speaker, the member for St. Augustine insisted that fragmentation occurred. Madam Speaker, the EBC has a formula. The formula is stated from the very beginning. Madam Speaker, even when you go to Mayaro Rio Claro, community fragmentation was observed, resulting from the settlements being expanded along major roadways, which also comprise electoral district boundaries. This is why it was necessary, Madam Speaker, to make the transfer of polling divisions 2,500 and 2025 from the various districts. Madam Speaker, it brings the average of 4,300 electors. And it's allowing the councillors in Rio Claro Mayaro to represent much more effectively. Madam Speaker, you cannot accuse the government of gerrymandering because simply this is done by an objective third party. Madam Speaker, we all well know the changing of boundaries in our electoral demographics is nothing new and has withstood the test of time. History would remind us of historical ties, forcing us to transcend and transform how we approach the democratic rights of our electorate. But this is no longer leaving the rights of the nation to any political party. This is simply the EBC doing the job that it is supposed to do. Changes have been made underneath this PNM administration, not because of it being beneficial to the party, but being beneficial to the people. We always place the rights of citizens. Madam Speaker, I want you to remember, I want everyone to recall, in September 11, 2013, when the UNC-dominated People's Partnership had the constitutional majority, they introduced proportional representation. Madam Speaker, it is proportional representation that allows individuals who graduated from life sport to sit on council in the Arima Borough Corporation.
Madam Speaker, 48.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, withdrawn, Madam Speaker.
Yes, please.
All right. Madam Speaker, once again, the PNM will continue to put the rights of each citizen first. This is not the reinvention of the wheel, but this is a reflection of the continuous growth of our population. This is a reflection of a nation that deserves good, intelligent governance. The nation that deserves details and data on domestic migration, not human trafficking. Madam Speaker, we deserve a well-oiled electoral machinery that serves our growing population and its needs. I therefore say, Madam Speaker, it's a simple, basic process. We all want the same thing: representation, service to the people. So, Madam Speaker, in the infamous words, let us move on and simply support this report, support local governance, and do what is best for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Member for Couva South. Member for Lavantil West, member for Superior, member for Naparima. Could we have some order? I'm sure we all would want to hear the member for Couva South. Member for Couva South.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will attempt to
Wouldn't like you to attempt to override that noise, so please continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Having listened to the Member of Parliament for Dabadi Omera and the Minister in the Ministry of Education, I will attempt to bring back some sanity and dignity to this debate here this evening. Madam Speaker, apparently the Minister of National Security seems to be a very disturbed man here this evening. He's attempting to disrupt the...
Member overrule, kindly take your seat. Member, take your seat. Please continue, Member for Vancouver South.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The member for Dabadi Umera, in her contribution, indicated that in her previous incarnation from an occupational point of view, she was a teacher, and she looked at the report from that angle, although being one of an English literature background, that she looked at the report from that angle, and it was a data-driven report. And from that position, it was something simple, and therefore the opposition really had no role here this afternoon in this debate, but to simply come and support the report that has been placed before the House here this evening. And Madam Speaker, the standing orders of the House of Representatives clearly allows a role for the opposition in putting forward our position and questioning the contents of the report, and that is what we are doing here this evening. And I listened to my colleague, the MP for Dabadi Umera, and she indicated that, or she boasted of her local government prowess in representing the electoral district of Arima Central and also her tenure as the mayor of Arima. But I simply and briefly want to remind her that apparently her track record and her legacy in the electoral district of Arima Central was not an everlasting, or it was not one of a profound effect, because if I can recollect, in the last local government elections, Arima Central is now controlled by the United National Congress under Councillor Sheldon Fish Garcia, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, in her delivery, that is the Minister in the Ministry of Education, she indicated that great achievements will happen in local government because of this report. And if I am to follow her argument here this evening that this report was simply data-driven, it was numbers, it was from a mathematical point of view, I am trying to follow her argument in relation to how great achievements will happen in local government because of this report. Because, Madam Speaker, no one on that side, from the point of view of the government, has attempted to create that narrative here this afternoon, and simply it was a misunderstanding or a lack of depth on the part of the member for Dabadi Umera in relation to how the report was analyzed from her point of view. Because I am forced to ask the question, where will the great things come out of this report, from this report that was presented by the EBC. Because if local government is supposed to represent the interests of the ordinary man of the society, will it lead to service delivery, an improvement in service delivery? Will it lead to a more consultative, or what we may term all-embracing process? Will it lead to an increased authority for the regional corporations? Will it lead to a boosting of the municipal police in terms of accommodation, numbers, and equipment, Mr. Deputy Speaker? And will it also lead to a greater influence of non-government organizations and community-based organizations in the community as it relates to the whole governance process, Mr. Deputy Speaker? And Mr. Deputy Speaker, clearly, the Member of Parliament for Dabadi-Umera was unable to deepen her argument as it relates to the report being a simple report. The report was based was steeped in figures and data-driven and so on. So it defied logic in terms of the argument that she attempted to put forward, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, again too, in listening, I have to listen very carefully because this is a minister in the Ministry of Education. And the minister indicated, as it relates to the boundary changes at the Mayaro Regional Corporation, that it will allow for councillors to do their work more effectively. How, if you increase the number of electoral districts, so you increase the number of councillors by 1 or 2, does that make it effective for a person to perform as a councillor? In increasing, it may reduce the size of the electorate in relation to the creation of an additional electoral district. But what is important, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that if that additional councillor or the burgesses in that electoral district that has been created additionally, if there is not more funding from local government, if there is not an increase in the manpower in terms of the filling of vacancies and so on within the regional corporation, if there is not an increase in what we would call municipal police equipment, and I could go on. And in addition to that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, timely releases from central government to the respective regional corporation, how will the councillor be in a position to perform effectively and to deliver to the burgesses in relation to the creation of an additional district? So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the minister in the Ministry of Education did little to educate me in terms of better delivery and performance of councillors in relation to her argument that she put forward during her contribution. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it defied all logic. It defied all logic, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And this is why we continue to say that they are using, those on the opposite side, the government, they are using this EBC report to pilot and to promote their propaganda of local government reform when none will come, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Okay, member, again, you would have been given some leeway. Again, I want you to be careful on the track you're heading down now, so tie it in with regards to your point.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I will follow your guidance, and I will move on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because when the Minister of Local Government, well, not the Minister of Local, he was formerly the Minister of Local Government, but the acting minister of local government piloted this report or moved this report here this afternoon in the House, he indicated, Mr. Deputy Speaker, during his presentation, he commended the staff of the Election and Boundaries Commission for their hard work and their independence in the conduct of elections, whether the local, general, and at the level of the Tobago House of Assembly. And during his contribution, the minister indicated that when the law was passed, and when I indicate the law, that has to do with the amendment to the Local Government Act, that is in relation to when the then minister, the substantive minister of local government, that is the member for San Fernando West, Minister Al-Rawi, hosted a cabinet media conference on the 3rd of November 2022 and indicated that the miscellaneous provision for the Local Government Reform Act was amended and that the terms of all councillors and aldermen currently in office at that point in time would have ended on the 3rd of December 2023. And he further stated that sections 11 and 12 of the Act would be proclaimed, which previously stated that councillors and aldermen would serve 3 years, a 3-year term, and that was proclaimed now to move from 3 years into a 4-year term. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the minister said that this was done with the widest possible level of consultation in Trinidad and Tobago. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to remind the country that the people of Trinidad and Tobago were never told that the law would be applied retroactively. And from where we stand...
Point of order, please. 48.3.
Okay, remember, tying the point quickly, right, with regards to the particular report. Remember, it's not a local government debate, but tie it in with the EBC report quickly, right? Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to move on, okay?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am guided. I'm merely responding to what was raised in the debate by the minister, well, the acting minister of local government. And taking into consideration your guidance, I move on. And I know that my colleague in her presentation, the member for Chaguanas East, MP Vandana Mohit, did deal with this point also, because I thought that the member for Port of Spain South, but it is important that we correct the records or we embellish the records here this afternoon. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when during the member's presentation, he indicated that the government of former Prime Minister Kamla Persad Bissessan, the member of Parliament for Siparia, delayed the general elections by 5 months, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to reiterate that the government led by the member for Siparia upheld the rule of law and the democratic traditions of this country to its fullest extent during our tenure, and whenever, whether it was local government elections, whether it was the Tobago House of Assembly election, or whether it was general election, it was all held in keeping with the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. And for the member.
No, members, please. Please. Right, both members on both sides, please. Right? Again, one of you all entered the debate already. The other one will have the opportunity to enter debate. Fair enough, but not across the chamber. Proceed.
So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is the point I was making, and I will continue to make, about propaganda. Because they felt they make statements into the public domain and they feel that it will stick. What the member for Port of Spain South was attempting to do was to create a narrative here this afternoon that the UNC was an undemocratic government. We do not subscribe to the rule of law. And it is important for me, as a member who served under the member for Siparia when she was Prime Minister, to correct the records, as I will be failing in my duty and responsibility here. And that is the role of the opposition in the context of the standing orders, which allows the debate to be free, fair, and independent. Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that is why I want to, from a time frame point of view, again, reiterate, because the general elections was held on the 24th of May 2010. The first sitting of the House of Representatives took place it occurred on the 18th of June 2010, and the general elections was held on the 7th of September 2015, all permissible under the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. So, the member for Port of Spain South, I would guide you. I would guide you to go back as a... And Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is important.
Talparo, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I hate to burst the bubble of the member for Couva South, but the time for the elections will come and the PNM will continue to keep the UNC in second place. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these reports are not created by the government, or for that matter, by any political party. What we do, as required by law, is review the report. The draft order will come to the Parliament, and as is required by law, we will do what we are required to do. Our role is to review and approve the findings of the EBC. And I do not know of any precedent where the parliamentarians have stepped in to make changes in terms of the work of the EBC. That is not our role. That is the EBC's work. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know of any time in the partnership or the UNC before that where changes were made. But it is just, it is just the normal style of the UNC. It reminds me of their approach to even the Caribbean Court of Justice, where when they're in government, they promote the Caribbean Court of Justice. They insist that we get the headquarters here in Port of Spain. And as soon as they go into opposition, they say, we want to CCJ again. We love the Privy Council. It's just, it is a normal UNC style. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these changes that are being reflected here may or may not affect the performance of any political party, but that is not the basis on which the changes are made. The basis on which the changes are made is spelled out very, very clearly in the law. And when we move to Diego Martin, for instance, a very populated area, in terms of Bagatelle Blue Basin, the electorate there is the highest, 98-62. Diamond Vale, 81-21. But when you apply the formula, the highest is 21% above the lowest, and the lowest is 18% below the highest. So, of course, no change necessary. And no matter how many issues the speakers before me try to infuse into this discussion, this is not a discussion today about the reform of the local government legislation as somebody tried to inject. It is simply about us considering the work of the Election and Boundaries Commission, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And so we are certain, we are convinced that the EBC has done its work. If we look at, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Rio Claro district, Mayaro Rio Claro, this is another area where an additional electoral district was created. Again, when you look at, there are 6 districts there, a total electorate of 30,000, but the EBC has recommended that the reconfigured electoral district of Rio Claro South Cats Hill be renamed Rio Claro South. And they have gone into detail to show how they have come up to the movement of electors from one polling division to the next, and have further recommended that a new electoral district be created, and this is going to be called Mayaro North. And so when you look at the point that was made by the member for St. Augustine about the numbers of the electorate in point 14 being just around 3,000-4,000, this is the same in Rio Claro, Mayaro. In Penal Debe, for instance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are some changes there as well, according to the formula outlined. And in Princestown, there is no change. In Sangre Grande, no change necessary. In Sawa Laventel, no change necessary. In Siparia, there are some changes. In Tunapuna Piako, one of the largest areas in terms of geography in the local government system, in reviewing all of the electoral districts, no change has been proposed by the Election and Boundaries Commission. And so there has been some alterations to some of the boundaries that, as outlined here for us, and some of the electoral districts, there has been some movement of electors from one polling division to another. So in the table summary that the EBC has provided, in Port of Spain, there has been no change, and the 12 districts remain unchanged. In San Fernando, there has been no change. In Arima, no change is proposed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In Shoguanas, 4 of the electoral districts of the 8 are affected. In Point 14, 2 of the electoral districts of the 6 are affected. In Kuva Tabaki Talparo, 1 additional electoral district has been created, and there are some changes and alterations in 6 of the existing districts. In Diego Martin, there is no change, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In Mayaro, Rio Claro, there are changes to 2 of the districts, and 1 new district has been proposed. In Princestown, no change has been recommended by the EBC. In Sangre Grande, similarly no change. Sawa Laventil, no change. Siparia Regional Corporation, there are some alterations in 2 of the districts, and in Tunapuna Piako, there are no changes being proposed. The report, I think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is comprehensive. It falls in line with the law that the EBC is guided by. And I was looking at, there's nothing strange about this exercise. I was looking at the Electoral Knowledge Network, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I came across a paragraph which speaks to the periodic delimitation of electoral boundaries or redistribution is necessary in any representative system where single-member districts or uniformly small multi-member districts are used. If electoral boundaries are not periodically adjusted, population inequities develop across districts. Additionally, the limitation of electoral districts is commonly associated with plurality or majority electoral systems, such as ours, and districts must be periodically redrawn to reflect changes in the population. And that is the extent of the exercise that the EBC was involved in, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is simply looking at the population movements upward or downwards in the various districts. On this occasion, we are treating with local government, and therefore, according to the law, it must not, there's a formula as I have outlined earlier on, and where there are changes, the EBC will reflect those changes in the report. And that is what we are about doing today. I do not intend to prolong this discussion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, except to say that in reviewing the report, all of the conditions where changes were necessary falls firmly in line with what the law requires the EBC to do. And we as a government, we are firm in our support for the work of the Election and Boundaries Commission. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my friend from Couva South spent some time speaking about the changes in the Couva, Tabaki, Talparo district. I happen to live in that area. And when I look at the numbers in relation to the changes that were made, there is nothing sinister about it. There is no intent by anybody to try and benefit anybody politically or otherwise. And as a matter of fact, I am quite pleased with the way that this has been presented to us, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I just wanted to point to one other area here. Yes. We have gotten very clear information in terms of the different electoral districts from the EBC. And these reports, Mr. Deputy Speaker, look at statistical information. It is data-driven, as one speaker said earlier on. In terms of the boundary management is scientific. Scientific instruments are utilized, and this is undertaken by the independent EBC. And it looked at not only in terms of the numbers, but specific, as you know, boundaries, you will use either major rivers, you may use major roadways, highways, and so forth. But then there are times when you may have, on the rare occasion, a particular road within a community being used as the boundary, and that might have or may allow part of the community to be in one electoral district and the other. But that is not the norm, and that may come only in very rare situations. As I said, the EBC by law must change electoral districts according to the legislation governing the Municipal Corporations Act 21 of 1990. And in that particular act, Chapter 2550, there shall be in every electoral area a basic number of 4 electoral districts, and to this basic number shall be added the number obtained by dividing the electorate of the electoral area by 15,000. But where in any electoral area the electorate is 1 less than 15,000, there shall be 5 electoral districts. 2, more than 15,000, any residual number left after dividing the total electorate by 15,000 shall be treated as if that number were 15,000, and 1 electoral district shall be added in respect of such residual number. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the changes are not political in nature or not tied to any political party vying for any seat. The EBC, by law, must exercise after the independent review of the delineation of the districts and the boundaries, and that is very clear in the report that has been submitted for consideration today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are 141 electoral districts in the 5 municipal corporations and 9 regional corporations in Trinidad. The distribution of the polling divisions by electoral districts are clearly outlined in the 10th report, which is before us today. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the EBC has done its work, and we, as the Parliament, are considering the draft order today, and I once again want to commend the EBC for the work that they have done, and to say and to lend my support to this draft order, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I thank you.
I recognize the member from Mayaro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this debate on the 10th report of the Elections and Boundaries Commission. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I shall not be very, very long. There are a few points that I would like to raise before this debate ends. What I can say is that the EBC has compiled within the relevant laws, and in presenting its report with recommendations based on its geographic information systems, the analysis of population movement, and other statistical reasoning that they would have used to come up with this report. As is expected, the EBC has explained its methodology and has spoken of what it's called community fragmentation. Now, the Commission is singularly positioned to undertake this study and to make its recommendation for the creation of new electoral districts and the revision of certain boundaries. And I have noted the creation of an additional electoral district within the Mayaro-Rio Claro Regional Corporation and its changes to the boundaries of 4 of its local districts. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to agree to an extent that it's important that we got a 7th seat at the Mayaro-Rio Claro Regional Corporation to avoid a situation that we had many years ago when you have ties. And when you have ties, what we would have found at the Sandy Grande Regional Corporation last time, to avoid ties, you make sure you put an odd number in terms of the seat. So having a 7th seat in the district, in the municipality, it would avoid having that problem in the future, which is one of the positives. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, the clinical work of the EBC is one matter, but the context and circumstance in which the work has been done is another. And this is where I want to anchor my contribution, my short contribution today. The issues I would raise relate to the environment in which the EBC has been prepared and presented. With respect to the EBC, I state again that it has the relevant resources and the legislative mandate to conduct an exercise for which no one else is sufficiently equipped or properly assigned. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we could make comments in this debate based on anecdotal matters, but we are not resourced to carry out a holistic review of the national electorate and its geographical location and its subtleties. But we must trust the work. We are expected to trust the work of the EBC, even though we are deeply troubled at times by the government's general ongoing perception of this whole, what the honourable member who spoke before me spoke about, the undermining of independent institutions. It's a perception that it's out there in the public domain. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the nation should expect more from the government than just presenting this report in an abstract setting. A debate on the EBC report is a constitutional requirement, and we welcome it. We on this side, we welcome the debate. But it should not be an exercise in isolation. That is a key issue before us today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as we debate the provisions of the report. The report is being tendered by the government without making it relevant, in my respectful view, to the urgent needs of the society for an enhanced role by the local government sector. The government is treating this EBC report in the same cold and detached way in which it has been responding to several pressing social and economic issues of the day as well. So local government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is ideally about direct, immediate, and measurable support for the people, especially the common man. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is about doing so as well in a tangible manner and not about making promises. It's about a meaningful devolution of power from central government. But today, in this report, it is being presented and debated, in my view again, in a very sterile manner, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, the presentation of this 10th EBC report is taking place in the context of the postponement of the constitutionally due local government election. This report also comes almost 8 years after the ruling People's National Movement promised comprehensive reform in the local government sector. But I want to stress that as a routine, constitutionally mandated report of the EBC is not an aspect of the reform of local government. The government cannot use this report to take a high ground on the whole issue of local government reform. The matter before us is simply the fulfillment
Mr. Deputy
of the
Speaker,
EBC.
Point of order, 48.1. This is not a matter that deals with reform in any form or fashion.
So again, member, right, I would have given you some leeway. So either tighten very quickly now or you move on to the other point. I think you would have highlighted some local government reform which is not part of this 10th report.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you for the guidance. So as I continue, it is really the government's constitutional role and responsibility to give life to the EBC work, which is being presented today, which I don't think they have done sufficiently in the debates from those on the other side. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to just touch quickly on the issue of the EBC's work. And I just want to make mention to a bit of some of the data that was presented. So we are told, in reference to the 10th report, that the electorate in Trinidad has grown by 24,064 voters, or 2.2%. But we have not been advised how they would obtain better benefits from the local government sector. In fact, as we debate this EBC recommendation today, budgeted allocations to various corporations continue to be delayed, and that is something that you hear every day from all municipal corporations. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the state of affairs would not change after the passage of this motion today, and it paves the way for 141 electoral districts in the 5 municipal and 9 regional corporations. The creation of the new Mayaro North district, to me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is a bit of mere paperwork outside of the fact that we are getting the 7th seat, and the report has not stated exactly where having this 7th seat outside of breaking the deadlock is going to benefit the constituency on a whole. That has not been, provided. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to just touch base on a bit of what's happening, in looking at what we're doing here with the EBC report. One must understand what's happening in other modern jurisdictions as well, in order to give a comparison. So I have one or two points to make based on what I've observed in my research in preparing for this bill. In other countries, local government has really a critical role in the delivery of healthcare, housing, planning, social welfare, education, public service functions, sports, and other vital areas. They use the local government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, really as an anchor for the economic development and strategy and as an agent for transformation. In Britain, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in my research, the local government has been fortified to become a front and center in providing essential services to businesses and residents. This is what, we are hoping that all these things in terms of what the EBC has prepared for us, because we have to trust them. They are the ones who are specialized. They have been given the tools. We must trust what the report is saying, but we want to see these things. In post-COVID-19, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the British authorities, they utilize local government to support small businesses, and really to provide some structure through these very troubling times. They also utilize, the local councils. They work with the schools, the universities, other institutions to promote business entrepreneurship and so on, employability. So here we see a stark contrast at times. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is very important that, we continue to look closely at ensuring that whatever we do coming out of this report in terms of the new districts that they are bringing on stream, this is really the anchor, because the EBC is the body that has been given the authority to make that decision. I don't think anybody here can challenge the EBC. I don't think anybody in the government side can challenge the EBC's report. We can't. We have to accept what they are saying. But we must also ensure, and we remind them, that there must be a need, or there must be an allowance for innovation and enterprise and anything that is coming out of the EBC at the end of the day. Because I do believe that local government is really the engine for re-energizing our country. And the government will be well positioned to ensure that whatever changes are happening at the local government level is really to where we must kickstart our economy, must kickstart our post-COVID growth back in Trinidad and Tobago. In terms of even local government assisting with the issue of crime, getting our municipal police force, getting it going. There were some promises of 1,400 municipal police officers. That is so important.
Again, member, please, not local government reform. We are dealing with the particular report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I shan't be long any longer. The time for change is now. We have no issue in terms of driving the proper change that we need to move Trinidad and Tobago forward at a local government level. So the EBC report, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in closing, it must be taken for what it is. It's really a function of the bureaucracy that is required to get this going. The local government sector must be brought closer to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and become empowered, properly funded, and an administered institution where the competence will improve the quality of citizens' life. The government must deliver on this agenda, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we urge the government to make this happen before the nation goes to the poll, before we get anywhere close to an election, and hopefully we will get local government going to get our country going, get our engines going, and we can start putting Trinidad and Tobago back on a track to prosperity, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much.
1 second, member. Before I called upon the Acting Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, I would just like to suspend the sitting for 2 minutes in order that the Speaker can resume the chair, please. So, sitting is now suspended for 2 minutes.